After everything that's gone on the last few weeks, is the LSU football head coaching job still desirable? We'll be talking about that and a whole lot more today on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome everyone to the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in, however you're doing so. And we'd appreciate it if you did follow us today and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And we got a lot to get to on this 3 and Out Thursday. And we're going to start off with LSU. Obviously, they're the big headline. We haven't heard much new information relative to what's going on with Brian Kelly and the lawsuit he levied towards LSU, because again, LSU seems to be wanting to fire him for cause. And this might just be more of a Michael Scott type situation where it's because they don't want him to be the head coach anymore. They don't like him, and they don't like the way he's operated things as the head honcho, which is an entirely different conversation that is going to be had over the next several weeks and probably months to come, whether or not Scott Woodward actually fired him or if somebody else handled business. They didn't officially fire him. Like, there's a lot of just yellow tape and things like that we're not necessarily going to get into right here, right now, and probably not for several weeks or months, just based off of what happened behind the scenes. And I'm just waiting for the 30 for 30 on the Brian Kelly time at LSU. Maybe that'd just be an SEC story. Who knows? That said, the question that I've been thinking about, the last 3 weeks, and again, we won't know who the head coach is until I'd say mid-December. You'll be missing out on the early signing period, no doubt in my mind. You'll miss out on that, but then you can start moving forward. And if your guy that you want still wants to come over, he's not going to be able to come in probably till after the playoffs are done and when their team is eliminated, which could be any time between, New Year's Eve all the way into mid-January. And that puts you very much behind the 8 ball. You are going to be hustling your ass off to find a guy that's going to be a mega star in terms of recruiting. You need to find those really top flight recruits, and it's going to be an uphill climb if you aren't finding your impact players from the jump. That's just at least how I see things with that. But the question I have, and I'm sure many people will answer this question, is the LSU job still desirable? Even with everything going on, there's a lot of black eyes on this program. You'd think it's some black eyed pea jambalaya, how much they've got going on over there. You look at everything. I think if you are a head coach, I think you want to go there more than anywhere else in the country, because you have an opportunity to truly endear yourself with a fan base, number one. Number two, I think it's probably one of the top 3, top 4 jobs in the country, just in terms of the potential to etch your legacy. And comes with a double-edged sword, because you can either be an Ed Ogeron, a Les Miles, or a Nick Saban, or you could be a Curly Hallman, a Brian Kelly, or a litany of others from back in the 80s and 90s where LSU wasn't necessarily all that great. They weren't legendary teams like we've seen since the turn of the millennium. And I think that you look at everything. You look at the entire coaching carousel cycle that's going on right now. I firmly believe, as of right now, because we haven't seen any musical chairs be rearranged, it's just been a lot of guys getting Das Boot. You got to believe that LSU, and I think maybe the Penn State job, are the 2 most desirable jobs in the country. Now, again, there's a lot of other places that I think if we were to put together on a tier list, I think the top 3, and this is in no particular order for what it's worth, it's Penn State, LSU, and Florida. I think those 3 jobs are the most desirable because, one, LSU's in SEC country and is going to be very competitive. Two, I think the fact that Alabama, while they are still a very good team, there's going to be levels to this, and there's going to be something to be said about what's going on with Texas A&M. Can they stay consistent? What they've been doing this year, nothing short of impressive. It's great, but at the same time, there's no guarantees it's going to keep going. That good thing's going to keep going for Texas A&M. It's very rare to see them in the position they are in. So hopefully, things kind of even out. In the SEC, anything can happen. This conference tends to cannibalize itself. So you've got a very good chance to be one of those that is a cannibal and handles business, and more importantly, gets to the college football playoff year in and year out if you're able to recruit well, and more importantly, if you're able to start putting some wins on the board that are a little bit more decisive. And I'm hoping that's the case. And hopefully, you can kind of focus on securing some of the others. Here's the thing. You have an entire program right now that is still having players commit to your program without a head coach in-house right here, right now. Think about that statement. You've got a group of guys that are still wanting to play for your team even after the head coach got fired. That never happens. I can't think of a time where players are still wanting to play at LSU, are still steadfast in wanting to be part of this program. And it's going to be really interesting to see how things go as we get closer to the early signing period and National Signing Day over the course of the winter. And then you obviously got the brand spanking new transfer window timeline. And that's going to play a role in the recruiting process. I think if you're LSU, it'd be great to go get a guy like Lane Kiffin. I still don't believe he's going to come over. It's just my personal opinion. I will stand by it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm never going to, back down from people shouting me down on it. But I'm going to believe what I believe. And y'all are just going to have to kind of deal with that. Sounds good? Okay. To me, this is where, if you're LSU, are you willing to bite the bullet and miss out on this transfer window opportunity to say, hey, this is our guy of the future that's going to lead you to national championships? Or are you going to go ahead and take the safety school bet, if you will, and you're going to put all your chips on the table to get somebody like, let's say, again, I don't think this is going to happen either, but a John Summerall over at Tulane. If he's available, do you go for him or do you shoot your shot and go for the big fish? That's a real question that I've been trying to figure out over the last couple of weeks. But going back to the main crux of this, is the LSU job still desirable? I think so. It's a top 3 job in the country, especially relative to what's been going on across the country. A lot of programs have let go of their head coach. Oklahoma State got rid of theirs. With Mike Gundy at the helm, they had been kind of tied together for the better part of like 20 years. So it was time for him to kind of exit stage left. Arkansas got rid of their head coach. And I think when you look at those programs, they have had guys just stay there for a long time, people who were just die in the wool. LSU, I think no matter what, you can put somebody in there, and I feel like they can turn them into a contender in about 2 years' time. That's a hot take I have, but I firmly believe if you're able to recruit and utilize that LSU moniker to go get some dogs, I guarantee you can be a contender in 2 years' time. I just feel like Brian Kelly didn't get a whole lot of dogs to come aboard, and he didn't see a whole lot of fight in the dog outside of, I think, a handful of guys like Harold Perkins. Like Barry and Brown doesn't exactly scream off the page to me. No offense to him. He's a good player. But I feel like there's not a whole lot of, meat on the bone when it comes to just absolute dogs and keeping these guys aboard. That's going to be the biggest thing LSU has to focus on in the 2026 recruiting class and beyond, is to kind of get the cool factor back, because I don't think Brian Kelly gave off a cool factor in any way, shape, or form. Jumping over to New Orleans, talked about John Sumrall. And this is just another hot take here. I think Tulane, obviously, their goal of making the college football playoff, it is a pipe dream and a half at this point. I think there's next to no chance. I think I've got a better chance of dating Sydney Sweeney. I digress. So with that, you've got 3 games left in the season. You've got Florida Atlantic, Temple, and the University of Charlotte. Just in my heart of hearts, I feel like this team is going to run the table. Now, because of the way things are, they are currently not slated to be in the championship game because they've got South Florida and Navy in front of. They're all tied up at 7-2. Whatever happens over the next 3 weeks is going to determine a lot. And I firmly believe this Tulane team, they have a very good chance to get to the championship game of the AAC, or the American now. So used to calling it the AAC, but they want to be called the American. So we'll acknowledge the way they want to be identified here on the pod. You got the homecoming game on Saturday, and it is a sellout, which is a different conversation that I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to touch that hornet's nest because I've gotten heat for it before in the past. Touching the hornet's nest that is the Cajuns fan base. That's a different point of view that I'm going to have. But Florida Atlantic, Temple, and Charlotte, those are teams more or less towards the bottom. I think the only team you might have a bit of an issue with is going to be Temple. They're 5-5 right now. It's a very, top-heavy conference with Navy, South Florida, and Tulane all in that same grouping. But you're facing the middle to the bottom of the pack in the next 3 games. You did lose to UTSA earlier in the year. That was your only loss in conference. But I think they aren't going to get upset. And then they're wrapping the season against Charlotte. They should be whipping their tail because, Charlotte hasn't won a single game in conference yet. So at the end of the day, you could be going into the month of December into a championship game, and that would lead to some major implications. More because you look at the standings for a lot of these teams. I think the ACC is going to get their guy in. But again, they need to have 5 spots for the champions. ACC, Big 12. I definitely think obviously the Big 10 is going to have theirs. Going to have their guys in there. The SEC is going to have theirs. But out of, the group of 5 or the group of 6, however you want to put it, who's going to be the representative? Who's going to have a better shot at being the representative? And I feel like in my heart of hearts, I think that if it's Tulane winning the AAC championship, I feel like they'd have a very, very strong case at the end of the day. That's just how I see things. So they run the table here, and I feel like they're absolutely going to run the table. They will handle things, and they will look great doing so. So Tulane running the table, I'd say book it right now. If they lose one game, everything changes, and you're just kind of wondering where they're going to wind up at in a bowl game versus the potential, the tantalizing opportunity to be a representative in the college football playoff for the group of 5, which would be a great thing to see. What's not so great is the New Orleans Pelicans. It's kind of ironic because we talked about it a lot yesterday on the pod on Tuesday, on the Let Me Talk to You Tuesday, about this team, and the team looked better. They looked better the last few games. Lo and behold, they have not looked all that great, and it's been interesting to say the least. And kind of wild, especially when you see some of the reports that are coming out. And we'll kind of just break down some of the rumor and innuendo and what's true and what's false, because NBA Central, which is a very well respected social media platform on Twitter /X / whatever you want to call it, that people within the Pelicans organization are ready to quote unquote crash out because Willie Green is still employed. This is coming from Doing It Dotson, who is a scout and also writes for Pro Hoops Writers, and he has a lot of bylines, including in Clutch Sports. But the report that he had has kind of gotten a little bit crazy. With, Legion Hoops posted this on X from Clutch Points, talking about where Willie Green sits entering a brutal 5-game homestand, which they lost tonight, 125-117. Again, a fairly competitive ball game, but they cannot rally. That is the biggest problem they have, is they cannot rally from behind. And Legion Hoops actually said he needs a win tonight to keep his job. And if that's the case, he is out the door. But Dotson, he basically said, the real headline is where he sits versus what this guy's done if they lose tonight. And there were some Fire Willie chants going on inside the Big Blender. But there's a lot of clarity that needs to be said. And this is going back to Dotson's original tweet saying, multiple people who work for the team in some capacity definitely feel the pain of a losing season and lack of fans in the stands. They used the phrase crash out, and none of those were coaches. This wasn't people that are, high up. This is just probably people working the ticketing office. These are probably people that don't necessarily have a whole lot of say BTS behind the scenes. These are guys that are reliant on getting butts in seats, and they just feel like the bottom's crashing out. This team is falling apart at the seams, and if Willie Green gets let go, it's not going to look great. And going back to the original post from Clutch Points from Chris Dotson, it's kind of wild because a 2-8 season, it's not a great look. And then the body language that's being displayed by the locker room has caused the office chair for Willie Green to go from warm to scorching hot. Dotson goes on to write, despite growing external pressure, organizational sources indicate that a decision on the embattled coach's future being measured against a preseason plan and a brutal run. His words, not mine. It's just Zion Williamson getting injured. It's like, broken clock being right twice a day type thing. It's a small 10 game sample size, but it's still not all that great, especially when you've been dealt the tough hand you have had. But you still got to win games. And according to the sources, you think it's all roses? Win games. That is it. Team sources are saying they need to win winnable games until, Murray Williamson returned. This is while they were in the midst of that 0-6 record, that 0-6 start. But they've been 2-2 since, and they've got a 5-game homestand. I think there's no doubt in my mind that they needed to win this game tonight, because now it's like, where can you find a win through this stretch of the schedule? Because next, you've got Friday night, you got the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James and Luka Doncic. That is going to be a struggle bus of a game. Then you got Golden State. And this obviously is not the Golden State of about 10 years ago, where they were beating everybody and their mama by like 20 points, and it was a different game, a different league. They're 7-6, but it's still going to be a very tough outing for this team. OKC put Belta behind to them earlier this month, winning by 31 points. You have that kind of game at home after losing the last 3 games. You got to be sitting there and be like, bro, what are we doing? What are we doing? So, like, at that point, you would have lost, like, if everything goes the way, you expected, by next Tuesday, you will have lost 6 straight games. And then you wrap up against the Denver Nuggets, who have always given you trouble. I just wonder if by the time we get to next Thursday, a week from today, we are possibly talking about the future of Willie Green not only being in question, but he may be already out the door. But we'll be sure to talk about that and a whole lot more as things progress. Appreciate you listening into the latest edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. We'll talk to you later. Make sure you go ahead, if you haven't already, follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. That way you don't miss a single thing of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast.